Take 3. In Chapter 6, or Unit 6, we solved using graphing. For Unit 7, we're going to solve with algebra. There's 2 methods, substitution and elimination. The first note will be about substitution. We're going to do it in 2 parts because some of it's tricky and because the video won't take more than, I think, 12 minutes. For the steps, you isolate one of the variables in one of the equations. To do that, choose the variable carefully, make your life easy. Then you substitute that solution into the other equation. Once you've done that, you solve for the variable. You take the value of that variable and you substitute it into the other equation, or either equation. You solve for the last variable, and then you verify your solution for both equations, just like you did when we were solving by graphing. You can pause this video at any time so you can copy down what is written. You can rewind it and listen to what I said again if you'd like. The very first one we're going to work on is set A. I'm not going to read these. Reading these is a pain. I'm going to number the equations, and you should do that too so that it's easy for you to present your information. Now what's going to happen here is we're going to do all of the steps that are above, but it doesn't look like 6 steps. It ends up looking like less. I'm going to choose to isolate x, because that is the simplest one. That's what I said about picking carefully. You have 3x, 4y, 2y. They all have coefficients, which makes working with them a little more difficult. So take the equation you've chosen to use to make your life easier, put the number on it so everybody knows what you're doing. And now we want to isolate x. So just like rearranging an equation, we're going to subtract the 2y from both sides, and we get negative 2y plus 2. Now you have to choose the other equation, so it's 3x plus 4y equals negative 4, and that was equation number 1. So number it so everybody knows what you're using. And we now know that x equals negative 2y plus 2, and we're going to substitute it in for x. So that means 3 times negative 2y plus 2 plus 4y equals negative 4. Remove the brackets, and if you think back to grade 9 algebra, we called this cleaning up the mess. Collect like terms. Negative 6y plus 4y is negative 2y. More cleaning up the mess. And then you solve it. Subtract 6 from both sides. Negative 2y equals negative 10, and negative 2, negative 2. So you get the y alone, and you have 5. Now you may choose either equation you want for this. I'm going to go back to the one I used first just because I usually rotate them, but you could use equation 1 here again. X plus, now we believe y is 5, so we're going to substitute. You see how we substitute, substitute, substitute? That's why this is called solving by substitution. So you have x plus 10 equals 2. If I subtract 10 from both sides, I get x equals negative 8. And I believe my solution is negative 8 and 5. But I am not positive. So I have to do a verification just like you did for graphing. So we're going to choose both equations, number 1 and number 2. And you're really good at this now. So you substitute negative 8 for x and 5 for y. Negative 24 plus 20 is negative 4. You know it works for equation 1. Negative 8 for x, 5 for y. Negative 8 plus 10, 2. So you know it works for the second equation and you know you've solved it correctly. I'm going to flip the paper over now, but you can just pause it and write or think or rewind if you'd like. The next example is example B. And again, I'm going to number the equations to make my life easier. So I have 1 and 2. Now I can work by isolating either variable in either equation, but think carefully. If you have to divide 9 by 6, that's not going to work out nicely, is it? If you have to divide 9 by 3, that'll kind of work, but then you're going to have it's a little messy. When I look at it, I always try to pick the simpler one. So I'm going to go for this. I'm going to use the 2's and the -4 just because I think it's easier. I studied it, I thought about it, I think it will be easier. And this time I think I'll isolate the y because last time we isolated the x, just so you can see how it works. So 2y equals -2x minus 4, just like we've rearranged equations before. So y equals -x minus 2. Be really careful not to drop the negative sign. Then you go to the other equation. And you're going to substitute in this time for y. This is what you believe y is. You're going to substitute it in for y. -6x, -3 times -x, +3x, +6 equals 9, -6 and +3, -3x plus 6 equals 9. Subtract 6 from both sides, -3x equals 3. Divide both sides by -3, x equals -1. Once you've done that, you can choose either equation to substitute what you believe x is. And I'm going to choose number 2 just because I just used number 1 and it's the habit I'm in. There's no other reason for it. You could choose either one you want. I'm going to number it number 2 so everybody knows what I'm using and talking about. I'm going to substitute the -1 in for the x. Again, the whole process is called substitution. So I have -2 plus 2y equals -4. If I add 2 to both sides, 2y equals -2. Divide both sides by 2, y equals -1. And my solution is -1, -1. And some of you will recognize this question from the last test. And then we verify it. And you cannot verify from what you rearranged. You must go back to the original. If you don't go back to the original, you will just be checking a mistake you may have made. Be really careful, no matter what, no matter how complicated things seem, to go back to the original equations. I think I've been telling you that since grade 8. And there's a check you've seen once before. Fairly straightforward. Isolate, substitute, substitute, check. Take a minute to think about this. You can pause it where you can see the whole thing instead of where I moved it up. You can have a look at it. You can copy it down if you choose. And here is the next one. I'm going to do C. Now this is going to be a little trickier. Here's number 1. Here's number 2. I'm going to choose to isolate the y because it doesn't have a coefficient. So I'll use number 2 first. subtract 4x from both sides. Some of you won't show this step because you can do it in your head. Then I'm going to go to the other equation, 2x minus 4y equals 7, and tell everybody I'm using number 1. I'm going to take what I believe y is, negative times a negative, positive 16x, negative 20 equals 7. You have to collect your like terms. Add 20 to both sides. Divide both sides by 18. And in simplest form, that would be 3 over 2, because you can divide 27 and 18 by 9, or it would be 1.5. I can tell you right now, we're going to use 3.5 because it's really important that you get used to using fractions. Now, I don't have room to keep going across the page. I'm going to take my 3.5. I'm going to go back to the other equation, 4x plus y equals 5, and I'm going to take x is 3/2 plus y equals 5. This is not tricky. It's easier to do 3/2 than it is to do 1.5. 2 goes into 4 twice, 6 plus y equals 5. Subtract 6 from both sides, y equals -1. I believe the solution is 3/2 and -1. Whoops, 2 brackets. Try to ignore that. I'm not starting again. Then I'm going to verify it. Again, you can use the fractions. You know how to do it. Please practice. In the next part of this note, there are going to be lots of fractions. So I'm going to substitute in 3.5 for x and -1 for y. I get 3 plus 4 is 7. I'm going to substitute in 3.5 for x and -1 for y. 2 goes into 4 twice. I get 6 plus -1, and I get 5, and there's the answer. It worked. So all of our work was correct. Please take the time to watch the video as many times as you need to do the note if you need to, and it would be handy to have a note so that you can look back at it. Do the first questions for 7-1, and after we've done part 2, you can do the second set of questions. Bye.